Welcome again to Frankly. I'm Chip Franklin with, of course, Mr. Frank Figliuzzi, former assistant director of the FBI, MSNBC contributor, and I'll get it out. And just a hell of an author with a hot best-selling book right now, Long Haul. We'll talk about that a little bit later on because I do have something to tell you. I talked to a police officer here in San Diego, was a huge fan of yours, and it just happened to come up. And so he'll be watching this as well. So say hi to him over there. We'll
cool, thank you.
Hey, I think this has been just an extraordinary week with the two Supreme Court decisions. One that came out today, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But as Trump continues to, he had his first public appearance since the conviction, and if anybody thought he was going to begin to rein it in, it went exactly the other way. And you and I talk about, I guess. The Fifth Risk by Michael Lewis talked a lot about what would happen, if somebody got in hold of government that didn't know what they were doing. But this is actually somebody that, should he get hold of government again, we know exactly what he's going to do, and it's not good.
The playbook is there. No one should ever feign surprise if Trump gets reelected and starts doing things that are clearly antithetical to democracy and the rule of law. I hear his followers are being interviewed, and they say things like, "Oh, he does it. It's figurative. He doesn't really mean that he'll do that. This is a figure of speech." Blah 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 blah. They're either kidding themselves or they are part of the evil that is being planned.
One of the things that we've heard about is arresting the current president, if in fact he wins, and his family. He even mentioned it, Jill, his wife. And media members as well, and specifically MSNBC contributors and also hosts. Rachel Maddow recently was talking about this, and it got me thinking about, how many people that are, commenting on this very specifically and accurately worry about repercussions. And, one of my favorite people on MSNBC is John Heilmann, and he joins us right now. John, great to have you here.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. Excited to be here. My first appearance on this august slice of air. It's awesome.
August slice of air. I love that already. Hey, listen, that is our title for this episode. There you
Frank,
go.
What's that painting behind you, Frank? What is that?
What's that?
Figliuzzi, what's that behind you there? What's that painting? I just want to know what that's Sonoran Desert. Where is that? What's that supposed to be?
You are absolutely correct.
Okay, great.
In fact, Catalina Foothills, to be exact.
Beautiful.
Tucson, Arizona. And the artist, I support a local artist there by the name of Diana Medeiros, who keeps me supplied in various artworks. If this were nighttime, I would be using my Night Drop background by Diana Medeiros. This has been a commercial for Diana Medeiros.
I want to say that I don't know if you know this, but my first job in a newspaper was an internship at the Tucson Citizen back in the days when Tucson used to have two newspapers. It was the Arizona Republic was the morning paper, and the Tucson Citizen was the afternoon paper. It was a Gannett paper. I worked there in the winter of 1986 when I was a junior in college, and it was when the shuttle. I was in the newsroom when the space shuttle. When the Challenger blew up, and it was in February of 86. Yeah. And I was in Tucson. I have loved Tucson ever since. And I just literally stopped by, there's that Ritz in the Tucson Hills outside of Tucson. Dove Mountain that's got all the saguaros around it. Incredible. Yeah. Some of the greatest. I'm a cactus nut, and I love the saguaros. They're insane. That is an amazingly beautiful place to go if anybody ever wants to take a really amazing desert.
Some good hiking, and there's a family of javelinas that likes to walk up to diners. I don't know if many viewers may not know what a javelina is, but it's a stinky pig-like animal that travels in herds and is half blind. Yes. There you go. That's your lesson for the day.
But I'll tell you about that. And our other co-host is in San Diego. Is that right?
That's me. Yeah, just right near the Del Mar racetrack. If you know the area pretty well.
I was down in San Diego a couple months ago to see Bruce Springsteen when he played at the San Diego Sports Arena. I went down there with my friend Cameron Crowe, who directed Almost Famous and is one of San Diego's most famous exports. And Cameron, who shot all of the Stillwater scenes in Almost Famous at the San Diego Sports Arena. So we were not only got to see a great show to see Bruce, who hadn't been back at the sports arena, at the San Diego sports arena for many, many, many years, but also got kind of toured around inside there and got to check out that place. That it is such a, I mean, that is a, and it's not an amazing venue. It's just, it's so, it's out of time. It's like, it's not been renovated. It was built in the late 60s. And so the San Diego sports arena holds about 10,000 people, which is not like a normal arena size. So it feels like a junior college basketball arena. And seeing Bruce there was awesome. And the crowd was great. And my most recent San Diego trip was back in April or late March. And man, it was great. So
my band opened for Bruce at the Child Herald in DC. About 40,
what year was that?
81, 80, maybe. Yeah.
Wow. Bruce Springsteen still playing at the Child Herald in 1981. That seems a little late for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what? The crazy story about him, I don't know if you got to read his biography. You know, he suffers from real bad depression, and it was really a moving insight into him. But he, you know, like a year after Born to Run, he had like $8,000 in the bank. I mean, people that they don't really get how hard it was back then. I mean, and different than today. You know, you got, especially athletes, you talk to these guys, and, you know, Cal Ripken never made more than $5.5 million in a year.
Well,
you know?
I will say that is there's some truth to all of that. I will say we're sitting here. It's the 40th anniversary of Born in the USA, and that is when things changed for Bruce Springsteen in terms of
favorite song.
$8,000 in the bank. No, not after Born in the USA.
Favorite song of Bruce
Springsteen's.
Favorite song from that record.
From that record, from Born in the USA. Well, one of the two songs for Stevie, either Bobby Jean or No Surrender.
My Hometown was the one that got it still gets to me to this day.
I love all the songs on that record, and to do another DC memory, you know, the thing of that album, which people have now finally talked about, you know, was that at the time was seen as this great patriotic Reagan era anthem, Born in the USA, and the fist pumping and all that stuff. And of course, it was this bitter song about the betrayal of Vietnam vets. Yeah. When Springsteen toured on the Tom Joad tour in '95, I saw him at Constitution Hall, and he did this tour for Ghost of Tom Joad, which was a very Woody Guthrie-esque record. He did a solo tour, just him and an acoustic and electric guitar. Just
is that from Nebraska?
No, Nebraska. No, Ghost of Tom Joad's an album that came out, and he did this acoustic. It was very Nebraska-like, though. Those are the two albums. They're kind of like Nebraska was from the early '80s, Tom Joad was from the early '90s, and he went around and he kind of reclaimed Born in the USA on that tour by playing a vicious solo electric guitar version of it that was kind of very much like, all you people have misunderstood this song. Let me make it clear to you what the song really is. Love Springsteen and love San Diego. So
last Springsteen thing.
A lot of throat clearing here before we get to our real topic. But yeah, topic. Go ahead.
Watch him on Broadway if again. It's on Max.
Oh yes, I've seen it. I saw it live 3 times. Okay, it's amazing and great on Max too.
Before we get into this, I want to ask you a question. You wrote Game Change, right, with Mark Halperin, right?
Yep.
And it was an amazing book and movie. The whole, the story and movie. But the thing that I always wondered was in some ways, was Sarah Palin the first Trump figure in modern American politics?
Well, no, I don't think. For the right answer to that question is no, not the first. Was, you know, if you trace the genesis of Trump, and the movement, the populist, grievance-based, nationalist, xenophobic, racist, that goes back further. And I would say, so another politician I covered, you'd have to go back. If you looked at Pat Buchanan's campaigns in 1992 and 1996, the things that Buchanan ran on were almost straight. They are the MAGA playbook. I mean, he had, you know, he literally, I mean, I covered the Buchanan campaign in 96 really closely. He courted the militia movement. He wanted to build a wall. He wanted to impose massive tariffs against China. He was anti-immigrant, anti-Chinese,
America
first, isolationist, racist, and flirted with anti-Semitism. He was the proto. I think Buchanan in 96 was the proto-Trump. Sarah Palin, I think, was the next phase in that. movement, which obviously she was the precursor to the Tea Party. And so,
Yes.
you know, when you saw Palin, and the Tea Party is part of that genesis, right? So you start with the kind of Wallace wing of the Republican Party. Buchanan kind of takes that to the next level. The Tea Party takes that to the next level. After that, Palin is the purest distillation of the Tea Party ethos. And then that leads to Trump. So there's definitely a clear line between Palin and Trump. It's just, she's not the first. It kind of, you have to take that history back a little bit further. Her, you know, her star power, her charisma, and the visceral appeal that she stirred up with people, the visceral appeal that she had for people who were in that wing of the party, definitely was something that Trump and the Breitbart wing of the party saw in Palin, and I think they would have, had she not turned out to be such a kook, they would have tried to ride her into the 2012 race. I mean, there was she was going to leave the 2008 race, and she was, you know, getting all ready to run for president in 2012. And I think you would have seen what would begin the beginnings of the MAGA coalition would have gotten behind her in a 2012 race, had it not been for that she kind of self-destructed. And then you had people like Steve Bannon looking around for somebody else, and they thought Jeff Sessions was going to be it for a long time. And then they eventually ended up with Trump.
She also injected the evangelical aspect of her own background. She came, it's not talked about a lot, but she came from a Pentecostal background, a very large denomination called the Assemblies of God. And that was an attraction for so many people. And, you know, the whole Jerry Falwell movement that started the move of the evangelicals into politics and the moral majority and all of that. I mean, even Pat Buchanan, correct me if I'm wrong, was a devout practicing Catholic.
His brother was a Jesuit.
Yes, and Pat's was a brilliant, smart guy. But that Catholic Scotch Irish, there are different religious, ethnic, cultural traditions that feed into MAGA. One of them, for sure. I mean, Bannon is very much like Buchanan. Has a very kind of that Appalachian Scotch-Irish Catholic background that he injects. And as you know, Catholic, Frank, if you know, I think you know about this stuff. I don't know how much you both know about this, but you know, the distance, the degrees of, you know, the Catholic, the hardcore, what I call evangelical Catholics are not in spirit that much different from evangelical Protestants, even though the evangelical Protestants think of the Catholics as being sinners and almost beyond redemption.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
In terms of politics and the kinds of things they bring into the MAGA movement, they're almost identical.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Holy. Yeah. If you get to the Opus Dei movement, which has infected a lot of government today, you're getting into living holy, righteous, clear, black and white, evil and good. It's all there.
I'd like to not get too far into the Opus Dei movement. Let's try it. Let's that's one bridge we shouldn't go. Let's all right.
Let's talk a little bit about we talk about white supremacy and Christian nationalists in this country and the possible threat they would pose now and under a Trump administration. Has that been exaggerated?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's no. I mean, look, depends on by whom. I mean, it's a little bit of one of those questions where, you know, are there people?
Hold on. Go back. If you go back and look at like at the Murrow building, right, and then you go through and you see, you know, the '96 at the Olympics, and the guy that bombed the Olympics was also shot, the abortion doctor, and you start going out and you look at it, there has been elements of white supremacy and Christian nationalists in our past. I haven't really seen anything to that degree other than January 6th since.
I have, sorry. So I all I mean is when people say it's something been exaggerated, my question is always kind of by whom. I mean, there's always, there are people always underplaying for their various purposes, downplaying or overplaying for their political purposes, the threats of things. If the question is extreme white Christian nationalism, is there a threat there? I mean, I think the FBI has been pretty clear on that, and Frank can speak to it. I mean, they are the major threat in terms of domestic terror in the country, according to the experts who know about this stuff way better than I do, which is the people who monitor this stuff for a living. And again, Figliuzzi, knows this better than me. So I don't think you can. I think it's I think those who are in authority, I mean in the right way, who are authorities on the issue, have been very clear about the extent to which the extremist movements in the country that we have that we're facing right now are a clear and present danger. And I don't think they have exaggerated. I think what they have done has been very clear-eyed about it. I think others of us others in different factions in our country have decided either to undermine those clear-eyed assessments, or to, in some cases, hyperbolize them for their own political purposes, which of course is as old as time. You know, people kind of taking what I try to do, at least in this area, I try to keep my eye on the ball, which is listening to people in the FBI and people who study this stuff, and everyone that I listen to in those areas, and the public assessments and in private reporting, are pretty fucking freaked out by it, and pretty like I've realized that the threat is real, and it's something we're gonna have to really grapple with. We're already grappling with it on a daily basis, and in a Trump administration where the tolerance for that kind of behavior and the lack of investigation or prosecution that was implied, I think you'd be looking at a very volatile circumstance in the country, and a very threatening and vulnerable one for particularly for people who are perceived as enemies of the administration, and those who are kind of trying to continue in the best American tradition of protest and opposition.
John, do you think that the media is wary of getting into this Christian nationalism as threat discussion because of the obvious concerns that, oh my God, now the media is coming after Christianity? Why aren't we hearing more about this as a threat, and what it means, and how antithetical it is to the Constitution? I think the average citizen out there hears Christian nationalism and goes, "That's okay. Yeah, I'm Christian. I like the nation. What's the problem?" And I don't see an education and awareness effort out there.
I mean, these are, boy, what a you guys who are asking the hard questions here, because it's so. I try not to paint with a super broad brush about this stuff. I mean, the media in America, I always end up answering these questions in a way that makes people frustrated, because I won't go, the media is afraid of the white Christian nationalists. I'm like, I don't know, who are we talking about? The media, as you guys know, in America now is a really complicated thing. And it's complicated in the sense that, you know, there's that we a lot of what people refer to when they talk about the media is the three cable news networks that are the dominant ones, right? No one who gives a shit on some level. I say this I'm arguing against my own interests here, but like the audience, the combined audience for MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News is trivial compared to the 350 million people who live in America, and the main sources for news in the country, which is what I would define as the news media, you know, in some sense. Where do people get their information now? They get their information primarily online, and they get it, most of them from Facebook, younger people from TikTok. You know, the things that are news media now, like to say, well, and I'm not attacking your question, but I think it begs a larger discussion. We have such a fragmented media now, and the vast majority of the information that people use in their lives comes not from the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, / NBC, ABC, CBS, / CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, let alone the places that I love. But, you know, I work at Puck now. Puck, The Atlantic, The New Yorker. These are all marginal, trivial institutions relative to the tens and hundreds of millions of people who don't ever see or hear any of those things, and regard them all as part of some establishment that they think is totally corrupt. And so they get their information from basically online, from sources that are not only are they not trustworthy, and not only do they spread a lot of conspiracy theories, not only they're not full of lies, but they don't have agency in the way that when you ask a question like, why doesn't the media talk about X, Y, or Z more? I say, well, the main source of news information in America is Facebook, and no one's in charge. There's no like, why doesn't Facebook talk more about this or that? No. It's, you know, it's the cacophony. It's the crowd that's talking there. And so again, I can tell you that I think that in a business that, if you're talking about mainstream media, if you're saying, why do we not talk more about this in the shrinking, and this is important, right? In the declining, shrinking, atrophying space that used to be the dominant media in America, why do we not talk about that so much? I think the answer to that partly is that those businesses structurally are small and getting smaller, atrophied and atrophying more, and are terrified at seeing their audiences declining every day, all of them. You know, it may be that MSNBC is kicking ass on CNN right now in terms of primetime ratings, and it is, but it's a shrinking pie. Every day the pie gets smaller. And in businesses where the pie is getting smaller, everyone is afraid of offending any potential viewer. Like who are we? What I'm not like trying to point the finger at MSNBC and say that from on high there's some dictum coming down, because there's not. But there is an atmosphere in general across all of these media of caution about, like, we're not running scared. There are still lots of truth tellers, but there is a general tendency towards, like, do we really want to engage, Frank, in what you're talking about, which would be a more concerted kind of an effort to be like, let's focus on this in a collective way because it's really important. It's really scary. There is at that level that would require the companies to make an affirmative decision to start doing a big concerted thing. And that big concerted thing would risk alienating some viewers. And so you don't see leadership at the top of those companies pushing them to do it. It's up to the individual commentators or hosts or whatever, some of whom do a fantastic job. We all, Frank and I, we say, oh, Nicole Wallace does a great job with this. She does, but it's because she wants to do it, and not because the leadership at MSNBC or at CNN or at any of these places sits down and goes, white Christian nationalism is a fucking problem. We need to get all of our resources on this. They are like, hey, we don't have that many resources anymore anyway. And if we do this, I don't know what's going to happen, but let's try to, keep making the few people who are watching happy. They're not focused on breaking China. Anyway, that's a long babbling answer, but I do think it gets at the place we're in right now, which is like, dude, it's a really different question if you asked this in 1972 or 1982 or 1992. It's not like that in 2024.
Yeah. Well, so
I'll answer the next question more quickly. I promise you.
No, probably not.
Can I add something on the end of that, Frank, real quick? When you said numbers are declining, and we all say that, it makes it sound like those people are dying, but they're going somewhere. They're going here, right? And they're finding it here. That means, we deal with this every day in writing on the web and on YouTube specifically, is we're chasing algorithms. So in other words, we're not creating content and having the algorithms find us. We're looking at the algorithms and writing content to that. And there's to me, a danger in that, because again, it's what you said before. We're trying to find an audience that likes what we have to say, as opposed to challenging people with new ideas and new approaches to policy and philosophy. I just, when I look at Trump, and I think, like, to me, the thing that he has, and it relates to Christian nationalists in the white supremacy movement, he is their catalyst. He was a catalyst for January the 6th, and he is probably the only real catalyst out there. Now, I think Fox learned a little bit of a lesson with Smartmatic. I don't know how much, but who's going to go out, or OAN or Newsmax or one of these others, News Nation, is who's going to broadcast if and when Trump tells people and he loses and tells people to go to the Capitol or go someplace else. I mean, and if he's president, I tell people that, 67 is this magic number, that in the Senate, if we don't have 67 votes, and he's unstoppable in essence, right? If he's president. I mean, is the Supreme Court we saw that 6-3 vote today on bump stock, and we heard Kavanaugh's comments after the pill was allowed. I think that there's a real sense, and Alito and Thomas, there's a real sense right now that something's going to happen in the next 6 months, and no one knows what it is. And how do you cover that without, as a news organization, without speculation and do you know anybody that watches Fox News, that watches MSNBC too?
Oh, I mean, apart from people who are professionally obligated to, I don't think there's not. I mean, that gets into a whole other kettle of fish, which is the information bubbles that we live in, and the fact that they call it epistemic closure, right? It's like when all people do is talk to each other, who talk to people who agree with them. They don't talk to anybody who disagrees. And so that's obviously a huge problem in our information ecosystem, and allows us not to have any kind of shared factual basis for governing, which is, of course, part of why we're in the soup that we're in right now. I don't know the precursor question. I think that when the stakes are as high as they are, media who are responsible and are trying to help voters and citizens to understand what those stakes are and what the level of risk is with certain kinds of choices have had to in the Trump era do things that we all would have been super uncomfortable with before then, back when things were quote normal. And one of the things that we're constantly tempted to do is to engage in a lot of speculation and I think more, it's not just speculation about scenarios, which I'm always really comfortable with when you kind of sit down, relatively comfortable with, where you can sit down and say, I can sketch out some scenarios here from what might happen. I'm not going to make predictions because I think that is like insanity, but here are some things to be worried about. Here are some threats on the horizon. Here are some reasonable scenarios. Instead, what people tend to do is to make to do a kind of speculative scenario sketching that's more deterministic than that comes much closer to like real prediction. And we're tempted towards that, right? How bad could it be? I get it. I'm not trying to be dismissive of people who do it. I try to stay away from it because, what will happen? Every fucking prediction I made every prediction I made in my head, let alone in public, and I try not to make very many of them in public, every one of them has turned out to be wrong. Like most of the things that have happened over the last, I didn't see any of this shit. The idea that that there was a part of the Republican Party that was growing that someone could come along and capitalize on, as Trump did, that is something that I felt like I had a handle on and saw coming before 2016. So when Trump arose, I thought that there was a reasonable chance Trump could be the Republican nominee. From that point forward, I thought there was no chance Trump could win the general election. And everything that's happened since then has been something that I had not predicted, or that I mispredicted when I've made a prediction, which is why I stay away from making predictions now. I do think that, like I've not seen anybody who's had the crystal ball over these last like 8 years who's been like, man, that guy called that. I'm like, most people, smartest people I know, mostly have been wrong when they've tried to do that kind of prediction. I think you're right to say that. Look, I mean, what we have seen with Trump is that we've seen a lot of institutional guardrails and boundaries get tested. Some of them have held thus far. Some of them have snapped. Others, you can see the places where they're fraying and weakening, and you're worried about them snapping in the future. And it's clear that Trump knows how to do things now with the government that he didn't in the 4 years that he was in office, and that he will be unconstrained in trying to in a more, not just ruthless, but more effective way, use the tools and levers that he has to get stuff done, that he'll be more effective at it. One can speculate that he was the first 4 years because he was largely incompetent the first 4 years. A Trump that has learned how to do some shit and then stocks his government with loyalists rather than anybody else. That is a prospect about which I think people have a total right to be alarmed. I don't, know, you don't need a 2/3 majority in the Senate. You need, if you have a 50-50 Senate, you can pretty much block anything from happening. You need a 2/3 majority to get anything done in the Senate. A 2/3 with 50, with a minority in the Senate, you can still stop a lot of things from happening. And there's a reasonable chance right now, looking at some of the returns that we've seen, there's a reasonable chance Democrats are going to retake the House. The actual control of the House by Democrats and a minority that can block anything through this filibuster in the Senate has a pretty good chance of blocking a lot of bad stuff happening on the legislative front in a Trump administration. Where the concerns are the stuff we've been hearing about these days. The things that I get worried about. It's a lot of stuff you guys worry about. The president, the executive authority of the president over national security and law enforcement is not really a matter of legislation. So there's a lot of stuff that Trump can't do. He won't be just able to do anything he wants if he's president. If the legislative is still effectively able to block him on stuff that requires legislation. On stuff that doesn't require legislation, which is a lot of stuff, that's where the concerns are. So if people ask me what to focus on, it's not like I worry a lot less about Republicans passing a national abortion ban through Congress. I think the likelihood of that given where the country is and given the way that there's a pretty even division between the parties, I don't think that's going to get passed by Congress. I don't think there's any chance of that. I think that that the things that you worry about with Trump are places where he can do what he wants without anything really checking him, and those are areas where he has administrative and executive authority. And this is the sweet spot of that, right? The stuff that you guys talk about all day long relates to national security, terrorism and counterterrorism, border security, things where, you know, the executive has a lot of, and law enforcement and the justice system. These are places where you can do a lot of damage if you're an autocrat and you're relentless and vicious in your ability to not give a shit about any kind of consequences and have no sense of political consequences down the line, and you just want to do what you want to do. Boy, you can do a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah, particularly, and it's not just about executive order at that level in those areas. It's about doing away with civil service protections of federal employees, career employees.
Yeah,
and
I don't want to downplay it. I don't want to downplay it.
literally
I don't want to down. I'm not by saying that there's some areas where Trump won't be able to have his way. I'm not downplaying the severity or the scale of the threat. The severity is high and the scale is large, you know, of what a Trump, an unconstrained Trump as president could do. I'm just saying it's not everything. Like there's some areas where the legislative still does matter in America, and that will give people who care about democracy something to hold on to. But again, it'd be really a lot better for the country and for democracy if you didn't have a budding autocrat in the White House. That's the bottom line.
No, controlling everybody from CIA director to attorney general to the 7th floor of the FBI headquarters to the DNI, getting rid of inspectors generals, or at least having them answer directly to you, making everyone give a pledge to you, including U.S. attorneys, maybe even the heads of FBI field offices who will lose their career protections unless they're loyal. All of it's a big mess. When we're talking about a second Trump administration possibility, John, what do we make? What should we make of polls right now? Not only right now, but polls moving forward. I mean, we seem to cling to every new poll result, and what's going on there? What's happening with polls?
I have a really clear answer for you guys. Okay, stop clinging. Don't cling anymore.
Okay.
The election is going to be really close. That's it. So like that it's a margin of error election. It's the polls that people look at the battleground state polls. I have commissioned polls. I've designed polls. I have interpreted them. I've written about them. I and I love polls, really interested in them. I think that like the horse race numbers in these polls show one thing. First of all, I will say that by and large, most people who talk about polls on television and read them do not understand what margin of error is. Margin of error as a number is a thing that people don't understand. Okay. So the margin of error in a poll applies to both numbers in the poll individually. So if you have a poll that says that it's 45-45, Trump and Biden, okay, and the margin of error is plus or minus 3%. The 3% applies to the 45 that Biden has. So he could either have 48 or he could have 42, somewhere between 42 and 48. The 45 is not a real number. What he really has is 42 to 48. Trump also in that poll with a plus or minus 3% margin of error also could be 42 to 48. What that means is that the poll could be Biden could have a 6-point lead, 48 to 42, or Trump could have a 6-point lead, 48 to 42. That's what margin of error is. You have to double it to really understand what outside the margin of error is. You would need to be more in a margin of error poll with 3. That's the margin of error of 3. You need to have a number, your lead or your deficit has to be over 6 points to be outside the margin of error. So when people say he's only up by margin of error is 3 and Trump is up by 1. Well, that's not inside that. That's inside the margin of error. But if Trump's up by 4, that's outside the margin of error. No, it's not. You have to be 6 ahead to be outside the margin of error. You're still within the margin of error if there's 6 points. So with 6 points in a 3-point margin of error poll, people don't understand it. Everybody in polling has given up on trying to get the media to interpret it the proper way. But it means that all of these polls, even when you see Trump is up by 5 in Nevada in a margin of error of 3, which is what a lot of those polls will be, that's still a tie.
All right. Hey, can I cling to that?
You can cling to the fact, this is my point though, the thing you can cling to is that all of the battleground states Okay. All of them. There are 7 broadly defined: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. We know about those 3. Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina. I could tell you which of those are real. Democrats aren't going to really fight in Georgia. Biden's going to probably lose there. They're not going to put money into that race. They think Arizona, the Democrats think they have, those polls are kind of messed up in various ways. And Nevada is really hard to poll. North Carolina, Biden shouldn't be competitive there, but they have that crazy Republicans running for governor there who might change things a little bit. But those 4 are of less focus because Biden is in fact weaker in all of them. And there is a path to winning 270 electoral votes by just winning Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Biden wins those 3 plus the congressional district in Nevada and Nebraska that is basically Democrat around Omaha. That gets you to 270. Those 3, the blue wall states. I will predict for you something I said I don't like to do. Predict that 95% of the money and time in the last 3 months of the election is going to be spent in those 3 states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And Biden, that is the path, the likeliest path. Back in the old days when Obama ran for re-election in 2012, the Obama campaign laid out for reporters, they're like, we have 5 different ways to get to 270. There's the Southwest path. There's the National Midwest path. There's this path. The Biden campaign really has one real path, which is winning those 3 Midwest states.
To your point, it was in 36 hours. They had 10 billboards up with Trump's comments about Milwaukee.
Yes, exactly. So they will be putting, and again, I don't want to say you'll see competition in Arizona and Nevada, less in North Carolina and Georgia as we get closer, as the days get smaller. The 2 things that every campaign has at its disposal: time and money. As the days get smaller and the money draws down, the number of states, the battleground states, always recede to the ones that really matter. And in this case, I think the likeliest scenario is that we'll be spending all of our time at the end of the race in those 3 states. But here's the part that I want to go back to, which is it's a margin of error race. Like the polls that all this bumping along over the course of the last 6 months is meaningless. The race is it's going to be a margin of error. It's a margin of error race today. It was a margin of error race 6 months ago. It's going to be a margin of error race coming into election day. And we're not going to know who wins until election night. And so the main thing I say to people is, I'm not going to tell you not to pay attention to the polls, but until you start to see polls that are outside the margin of error, that are consistently outside the margin of error in a battleground state, just say, this is a margin of error race. It's too close to call. That's what that means. And realize that until election day, Joe Biden could win and Donald Trump could win. Yeah. And if there are things that over time, trend lines that could emerge that would make you kind of be like, I understand that both of these guys could win, but it seems to be trending more towards Biden or more towards Trump. But we haven't seen those things yet. What we've really seen is very narrow bumping along in that, that has been driven by news. After the State of the Union, when Biden did well, he got a little bit of a bump, and then that receded for a little bit. After the verdict in the Trump trial, Biden got a little bump, but that's going to recede a little bit. The debate's going to change things a little bit, could give somebody a little tiny spike, but it's all still inside the margin of error. So relax. I'm not saying relax. What I'm saying is if you want to get stressed about shit, get stressed about the prospects of a budding autocrat and authoritarian becoming president of the United States, and go and register some voters in Pennsylvania. That's a great thing to be stressed about. Yeah. Like, be stressed about what the election could lead to. Yeah. And realize that Pennsylvania is going to be really close, and you can help. You can go to Pittsburgh suburbs, or you can go to the Philadelphia suburbs, or you can go to central Pennsylvania and register whichever party you're in. But let's say you're on Team Democracy, you can register people to vote and do some work that could do some good. Channel your stress, which is appropriately about the prospect of an autocrat / authoritarian becoming president, and go do something about it, rather than sitting around all day long watching these little tiny flutters in the 538 polling average, and sitting on your fainting couch with your fan and sitting there, Trump might win. It's like, I've been saying this to liberals for 6 years now, 7 years. Shut the fuck up. Stop reading the internet. Go out and register someone to vote in a battleground state. Go do it. Like, I get you're scared. There's something you can do. Work it off, man. Go out there and get the thing done. And I say to this about like when people say, well, I don't know if that'll do any good. I say to people, hey guys, when the Supreme Court repealed Roe versus Wade, and people said there's going to be an abortion initiative put on the ballot in Kansas. For 30 years, we've done polling in Kansas, and the state is 60-40 pro-life. They are going to outlaw abortion in Kansas. They are definitely going to do that. The state has said in polls for 30 years, 60-40 pro-life. And then the thing happened, and the pro-choice, pro-women's reproductive freedom people rolled in there and educated people about what it now actually meant, that Roe v. Wade had been repealed, and that what would happen if the constitutional amendment passed in Kansas. And not only did they win in Kansas in the middle of the summer in a Republican state where they rigged the thing to happen at a time when the turnout would be low and activists would be sure to pass the repeal of abortion rights in Kansas. Not only did they win, they won 60-40. After 30 years of polling that said the state was pro-life. I mean, to me, it's one of the most magical things that I've seen in democracy in a long time, which was like, this is a state that was absolutely for sure gonna if Roe v. Wade got struck down, that they were absolutely for sure gonna make abortion illegal. And when it got put to the test, and actual people who were activists and people who cared about women's reproductive freedom went there and fought the battle on the ground, not only did they win, but they won in a landslide. You know, that's the story of, you know, as much as our politics are, you know, we're in this block and so few persuadable voters and so much is already baked into the cake, you could still see things like that happen when people are faced with the actual real consequences of what might happen, that there's a lot of settled expectations can be blown up. And in that case, you know, turned out like the rest of the country, that Kansas, just like everywhere else, about 2/3 of people are pro-choice in America. That's how it is. And you, by doing the work, the pro-choice people won that fight. And I point to it not to be blabby, although I am, but just to sort of say, whenever I hear people who sit and want to stare at the polls all day long and be worried about the polls, rather than going to Pennsylvania and registering voters, you point to that and go, that's what a difference it makes if you get off your ass and go do the work. You know, you can win. You can win.
Great takeaway. Great takeaway, John. News you can use, action item, and really getting our focus right collectively. I know time is really dwindling. Give us a short burst on your current gig at Puck. What are you doing at Puck?
I'm writing. I write after taking about a decade. I used to be a full-time. I used to get paid on a full-time basis to write things. Was my kind of gig. I was a longtime magazine writer and I wrote some books. You guys mentioned Game Changer earlier, and then I got sort of sucked into the world of doing a lot of television, which I'm still doing. But I when this election came around, I got the bug to write again. And Puck is a subscription-based newsletter company that's been getting a lot of altitude and has figured out an economic model that works. And that's a pretty rare thing right now in the world of digital media, where they're doing, they're covering all corridors of power from Silicon Valley and Hollywood to Washington and Wall Street in a pretty elevated way, doing serious, high-minded, rigorous, challenging reporting, and they figured out a model that can pay for it. And as I say, that's not a very common thing right now in a pretty bleak digital media landscape. So the opportunity to come along and do a weekly column for those guys to become the chief political columnist there presented itself. I thought this election was, obviously, as we've been talking about, pretty important. I was kind of getting a little restless about not having a platform for writing. I like working at startups in these spaces. I had done a startup before this called The Recount. I had been in the early days back at Wired Magazine and Hot Wired when we first started putting stuff on the web back in the mid 1990s. And so the idea of being in a place that was kind of on the front foot and trying to figure out the new economic models for this, for the world of media, and that was doing the kind of work those guys are doing, was really appealing. And so I'm doing this weekly column for them. And then I just relaunched a podcast that I had done at The Recount for a while called Hell and High Water. We rebranded it and called it, and are now calling it In Politic, which is the name of my column. And we've launched that just 2 weeks ago. And instead of doing that show once a week, I'm doing it twice a week. So I got a twice a week podcast, In Politic, with John Heilmann. You can find it on any podcast platform and at puck.news. You can sign up for the the Heilmann Sunday night column that I'm writing. And if you do that, you sign up for it and subscribe to Puck, you can also get access to all of the other people who write for Puck, some of whom are just, I mean, all of whom are great. And, there's really best in class writing about the entertainment industry, about Wall Street, about there's a team doing Washington for them in a really unique and powerful way. We got a great woman who writes about the fashion industry and a guy who writes about the art market. And anywhere where money and power kind of dwell in America, Puck has its eye on that. And so there's a really great assembly of newsletter writers there who are cranking out really excellent stuff. So check it out.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, nuance is lost, I think, in everything but writing, it seems today. And, I think of that Fran Lebowitz line, says anybody that says they love to write sucks at it. It's so hard,
It's the worst. It's the worst.
Yeah.
It's the worst. It's the worst. The only way I can ever, people say, well, why do you hate it so much? I'm like, I hate it so much, not because I'm not pretty good at it. I'm pretty good at it, but I feel okay with it once it's done. And I look at it and go, that's all right. That's English.
Right.
But it really feels to me like every time I write something, I feel like I'm passing like a bowling ball through my ear. It's the closest thing. It's the closest thing. It's the closest thing to labor that I can imagine. Literally, I feel like I'm like there's a bowling ball in my head, and I'm squeezing hard to push it out through my earlobe, through my ear,
Yeah.
and it pops out like that level of pain as the thing comes out.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it any other way. It's horrible, but
which is why Ernest Hemingway was a drunk. So
yes, and not just him, Frank, and not just
I
him.
know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the time.
Guys,
Again, people can see you on MSNBC. They can find you at what's Puck's URL?
It's puck.news.
Puck.news. All right.
Puck.news. Check it out. Go check out puck.news. And you guys, I thank you for doing the Lord's work here on this. We were talking before about the way that mainstream media is, unfortunately, for those of us who made a life and a career in it for a long time, it is in a state of pretty terminal decline. And so people who are out trying to find these new channels for video, trying to live, really take advantage of the proliferation and democratization of digital media and doing it the right way, like doing it for like keeping their eye on the ball and talking about stuff that really matters. You guys are in the forefront of that. So thank you for doing it. Really appreciate you.
I'll see you at the convention this year. You're going to be in Chicago?
I'll be in Chicago. Yes, I will. And in Milwaukee,
I know they're both great.
Well, Milwaukee's horrible. Trump said it. It's horrible. Yeah.
Hey, my father's from Milwaukee, and if you make your way to Wisconsin, you'll find up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, the G. Heilmann Brewery, where they make old style and special export. It's the world's largest 6-pack is up there. I'm serious, like a 4-story high series of 6 cans at the Heilmann Brewery in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So I'm a Wisconsin. My dad was from Wisconsin. My mom from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and I went to school in Chicago. So that part of the country I'm always psyched to get back there, and I'm going to have it. Actually, I don't mind
the cycle there.
Yeah.
When
dude, I'm going to camp out. I'm going to get a place in like Racine or something, and just use that as my base for the last 2 months of the campaign.
Thanks,
maybe
John.
Waukesha County. Bye, guys. See you later. Take care. Good to see you guys.
John Heilmann. It's funny. His name first popped up for me with Game Change, and which is a great insight as to how a campaign can just totally go off the rails. I believe that in 2008, that had McCain not had Palin, had he found, I really did think that that's just a lot of independents can't do it. That would have, because Obama was pretty new on scene. He'd only been on the scene for like 3 years. Since that speech at the DNC at the convention. Let me ask you something. And I meant to ask him, if you had like 5 minutes with an independent voter, what's your case for democracy?
Yeah. I first of all, I'd say let's jettison all this discussion about which of our candidates is older, which of them can't move, or which of them forgets his words or freezes in front of a teleprompter. Let's just assume for a second that they're both really old candidates and that we're not thrilled. Let's just say that for a second. I'm going to vote for democracy because I believe in freedom and preserving the Constitution and the rule of law. And I believe in championing democracy for as long as we can, because it works. It's ugly. It has, we have to battle to preserve it. We've been taking it for granted, but authoritarianism and dictators are not what we ultimately want. And all I would ask them to do is flip the table over and let's put, your least favorite party in charge and look at it that way. Do you want your least favorite candidates? Because I'm all about planning for the worst case scenario. That's been my career. Worst case scenario, someone you can't stand is in power and becomes that authoritarian and that dictator and controls every branch of government. Is that who you want in charge? Or is it just because you think maybe Trump can make a difference against crime or the border? And I think we need a strong leader. Forget that for a second. If you're for authoritarianism, you're for it. You're for it now, and you're for it moving forward, because the genie will be out of the bottle and you can't put it back in.
Yeah.
That would be my argument. Yeah.
And I think that, obviously this is the same case I make for expanding the Supreme Court, is I would like to have more than, a pickup basketball team working on the greatest issues of the day. And I think we need more people, and I think we should work hard in a bipartisan manner. I mean, if we look back, Merrick Garland would have been a great justice. Yeah. Look at the way in fact, to a fault, I think the thing that would have made him a great justice made him just an okay attorney general. We want an attorney general. We want him to move fast and with expediency, right? Not fast, but with expediency, and and bringing everybody together to make the right decision. With the Supreme Court and courts, I want to. When I say conservative, I want somebody that makes cases based on law, based on the Constitution, and not the popular sentiment at the time, or like with Alito, what he said, but not being able. Again, all of that is concerning to me, and it's funny, we never really did get into whether or not, and I don't think John feels that way, whether or not people in the media really worry about what might happen in a Trump presidency. I don't think that he wants to go after the media. I still think in his mind he thinks he can win them over. I really do think he thinks that I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. So real quick before we go, how about long haul? So you've been doing these interviews on this bestseller. I've been talking to people that love it. People asking me who's going to star in the movie and all that, but you're going to have to, for this book, which is a bunch of stories, right? You'd have to kind of thread through that. You'd have to have, do you allow yourself that fantasy to sort of think about people you'd love to see in a movie from a book?
I haven't gotten there yet, but I will tell you this. It's we've done some things that are pretty rare in the publishing industry. We're just over 2 weeks out and highly unusual, but our second week had better sales than our first week, which was, and for people going, so what's so rare about that? Well, you may not know that your first week numbers include all of your pre-orders together with the first week of launch, and which was phenomenal. But then the second week we surpassed that the first week. Now we're into, again, something fairly rare. We're already into a second printing of hardcovers, which is phenomenal. And yes, we do have some interest. We have interest coming from Hollywood and production companies. And there are various story arcs you could take through the thing. I won't get excited until someone buys it and says, yeah, we're gonna put it on the screen in some form or another. But mostly I'm thrilled that the story is getting out of something that most Americans, we're shedding some light on the trafficking problem along our highways as well.
I saw someone, I flew up to Oakland and back the same day, and I saw somebody in the airport with the book, and I went up to him and I said, so I'm just kind of curious why you're reading that book. And then they looked at me like, why are you asking me that? And I said, I know Frank, I'm just kind of curious. He goes, oh, I love him. He's great. We watch him, and I'm excited. I've read The FBI Way. So I think that word of mouth is also people seeing it. And it's an amazing story when you tell people, that there are serial killers on the roads today and in 18-wheelers and trucks. And it's the opportunities there. It's, you always wonder, did the person get into it with that? Like, because they knew that it would be a way to do it, or was it something that just came along after they started doing it? You know.
Yeah, I definitely asked that nature or nurture question in the book for sure. Speaking of airports, we're getting into airport bookstores now, which is a perfect read. Fits in your backpack. You're good to go. There's an audio version that I voiced myself for those truckers and travelers who listen, audibly to their books. That's there for you as well.
And by the way, if you're a trucker, you're going to like this. It's not going to upset you. So it's obviously I've read it, and it's a book about heroes, about people within the industry that were part of helping this bring this to light, and hopefully at some point making it go away completely. But that's a tall task, as always.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're tracking down Congressman Ro Khanna. We got Max Brooks in a couple weeks. If you're not familiar with Max, he wrote World War Z, which is the zombie movie, but it was actually a metaphor about how to deal with a pandemic. And he works with West Point and the U.S. military and the federal government on helping plan scenarios to deal with unforeseen scenarios. And as we talk about, the avian flu and what could happen there, and not to mention, security issues. What if there was a biological attack, and, the best way to deal with it and how it works. So we have him in a couple of weeks too, and we're looking for Eric Swalwell, and we'd love to, you can send stuff to me at chip@chipfranklin.com. If you have any ideas, we'd love to hear from you, and I'll pass it on to Frank as well. Long haul, find it in a bookstore, grab hold of it. That's Frank Figliuzzi, a former MSNBC, a current MSNBC contributor and a former assistant director in the FBI. I'll kick it out of here soon. All right. Yeah, we'll talk to you soon, buddy. See you.
See you. Take care, Chip.